Hi everybody, this is Blaine with Orchids for the People, where we cater to the curious and long-time orchid addict. Today I'm here to talk about something that we get asked a lot about, and that is our growing medium. And today I'm going to kind of go over what we use, why we use it, and how to use it. So this is what we use. This is coconut fiber, straight up coconut fiber. This is all we use on about 95% of our plants. The only things that we really don't use it on are pure terrestrial orchids like calanthes, phayas. We even use it on zygopetalums, paphiopedilums, phragmipediums, things that don't necessarily grow in regular orchid mixes, but we have found that it works really well. So it comes to us in compressed bales. We generally get it out. We don't have to wash it. They do not use salt water to process it like they used to with the old coir. And so we can use it straight out of the bale. And the first thing we do is fluff it up a little bit and just kind of get some of the fines out of it. We don't work it as much as we used to. We have found that we just don't need to process it very much to use it. So it's a very simple potting medium to use. There's no mixing, there's no ratios you have to deal with. We just use it straight. And before I get into repotting something, I just wanted to show you some examples of how they grow in this stuff. This is I'm just going to show you some various plants, various groups of plants. This is a Laelia, and you can see the roots get all the way to the bottom. This is an older plant. This is pretty much ready to be repotted at this point. We do like to repot every year to 2 years if we can get to it. And some things need to get repotted faster than others. So this is a Cattleya. You can see the nice roots getting started. This is a seedling. Here's a Masdevallia. Our Masdevallias grow really well in the coconut fiber, and just like any potting mix with Masdevallias, they do prefer to be repotted every single year. So it is a chore, but we love Masdevallias, so we don't mind doing it. And you can see the root growth. It's fantastic. Big, healthy, stiff roots, reaching all the way to the bottom of the pot, which I find is very important. A lot of times with bark mixes, you will find that the roots are great until about halfway down the pot, and then it's just so much decomposed matter in the bottom of the pot that they don't grow very well down there. That doesn't occur with the coconut fiber. The other cool thing is you can just pop plants out of the pot to take a look. You know, maybe you think you have a slug in the bottom of your pot, or millipedes or something like that. You can always inspect the roots and then put the plant right back in the pot without any damage at all. Here's an Oncidium intergeneric. This one was repotted just recently. This is probably fall, so probably 3 months or 4 months, and you can already see that the roots are getting to the bottom. The mix is still in really good condition. The roots are super healthy, lots of them. Just stick it right back in there. Here's a Maxillaria. These have been in here for about 8 months or so. And again, you can see just how nice the roots are, how clean they look. There's no browning or rotting. It's just a really nice mix, and the plants just love it. We use these water dance pots. I really like these water dance pots. The biggest advantage with these is all materials decompose over time, and the coconut fiber is no exception. So as it decomposes, it just basically falls right out of the bottom of the pot. We don't get that mud in the bottom of the pot. Maxillarium. Here's a little tiny dendrobium. This is Dendrobium herpetophytum. Has little white flowers. Looks almost like a little angraecum. This one has not been in here for very long. It has cool purple flowers, or purple roots. And you can see they've already, I find it super important that the roots make it to the bottom of the pot. The faster they get to the bottom of the pot, the healthier the plant is going to be the entire time that it's in the potting mix that it's in. And so they get down there fast. The reason why I think it's important that they get to the bottom of the pot really fast is it's just another way for them to breathe. You know, you've got, be it whatever they are, drain holes in the bottom of the pot, which allows oxygen to get into the pots. And the faster the roots can get to that oxygen source, the better off they are. And then lastly, here's a dendrochilum, little grass orchid. And again, you can see this one's probably been in here close to a year. Nice roots. Very clean. That's another thing that I really like about it is there's not a lot of buildup of decomposed matter. And I think that has as much to do with the pots that we use as the potting material. And then lastly, here's a mount. This is Ornithocephalus ecuadorensis. I think I got that right. When we mount plants, I try to keep it as simple as possible. I use twisty wire and coconut fiber. I like the twisty wire because it's really easy to put on. It's ugly when it's on, but it's really easy to go back and take it off as soon as the plant is rooted to whatever you're growing on. We grow primarily on madrone wood. It's a nice, really dense wood that doesn't break down very fast at all. Plus, it's a pretty wood. It's red. It's a very pretty wood. But what we do is when this one's been done recently, is I basically put the plant directly on the bark or the wood, and then put just a pad of coconut fiber over the roots, and then wire it all down. And my theory behind that is I want the roots to be in contact with the wood so that they attach themselves quickly. If you put a pad of moss behind them or coconut fiber, the roots sometimes tend to hang off the bottom of the mount, and they don't weld themselves to the mount very well. So we just put the coconut fiber over the roots to protect them a little bit while they attach themselves to the wood. And a lot of times when we take off the twisty wire, most of the coconut fiber comes off with it. Okay. All right. So while I have these plants here to show you a couple of advantages that we have found with the coconut fiber. And some of these deal with our growing conditions, and some of them will be universal. They'll help with you, with your growing. The first thing that we like about it is super light. Basically, the only thing that adds weight to these are the plant. Plastic pots, coconut fiber. It's a very light setup, and we appreciate that. And more importantly, our backs and our tables really appreciate the light weight. When you start putting tray after tray after tray of orchids onto a table, they tend to sag and break. So this really helps keep the tables healthy for a longer period of time. Another thing that I really like about it, and I think is a great advance or advantage, is when we water, you know it, I know it, you're going to knock plants over. And so when these plants fall over, nothing comes out. Um, the plant may come out, but you just stick it back in. Whereas if you've just planted a bunch of plants in bark, every time you knock over a plant, basically you have to repot the plant. So that's a big advantage for us. The other huge advantage for us is weed control. One of the really nice things about this material is it dries out very quickly on the top. And so weeds don't get a chance to land on a moist surface and germinate and get a hold, a foothold in the mix. That helps us a lot as far as weed control. The other thing is when we do get weeds in here, compared to bark, when you pull oxalis is a perfect example. You know, you've got these little tiny weeds that when you try to pull them out of a bark mix, the top pops off, but the taproot stays because the taproot has gone down and then probably wrapped itself around several pieces, chunky pieces of bark in a regular mix. In this mix, if you think about it, the root is going down and you just have these fibers. So you can get down in there, pull the taproot out, and the worst thing that's going to happen is you pull some of the fiber out with it. But you can get a lot more of the weed that way. And that's been a huge bonus for us as well. Another thing, speaking of drying out, the mix does dry out evenly from top to bottom. We will find in our nursery that a lot of times we'll go through and they'll look dry on top, but if you turn them over, the bottom will be moist. And for me, that's all these plants need. A little bit of water at the base, and this is just water within the potting material. It's not a puddle of water in the bottom of the pot. So they don't rot, but they have a little bit of a water source to draw from. The weeds don't on top. So that's that. Downsides to this stuff. I don't care what anybody tells you, there's a downside to every single potting material that you will ever use. The downsides to the coconut fiber is it does break down a little bit faster. Just because it's a finer material, it does break down a little bit faster. It lasts 2 years in our greenhouse, and that's plenty. Orchids should be repotted every 2 years, and we have about 30,000 orchids in the 2 greenhouses that we have, and you know, they're either sold or we repot them every 2 years. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. The longer they stay in any material, the more likely that material is to break down and cause oxygen deprivation, basically, at the roots, and too much water, and they rot. So snails, slugs don't like it. There's not a lot of hidey places for them to go like there is in bark. A lot of times in the old days when we did use bark, you know, you'd pull a plant out of a pot, say a terracotta pot with one hole in the bottom, and a slug had made its home in the bottom of the pot, just moved some bark around or found a hole and had been living in there for, you know, who knows how long. And with this stuff, it just doesn't happen. The one animal that we do have to deal with, and it's easy to control, are millipedes. They're not that big a deal, but they're a big enough deal that we do control them. They tend to like to eat the coconut fiber. They don't really go after the roots until there's a very large population of them, and they will nibble on the roots. But kind of like a roly-poly or a sow bug, Um, but they think the stuff is spaghetti. Basically, they eat it and it just comes out the other end almost as quickly as it goes in. And we'll get these hollow spaces in the mix for one reason or another: decomposition, millipedes eating it, whatever. But for me, again, that is not a disadvantage. As long as the roots are holding the plant up, it's not sagging in the pot. There's plenty of material around the roots to hold some moisture. So millipedes are really our biggest enemy as far as the mix goes, and they're not that big a deal. We control them with snail bait. Works great for controlling millipedes. 7. A lot of the other insecticides that you're going to use for aphids, mealybugs, scale, all of that stuff controls the millipedes as well. So they're just not that big of a problem. Okay, so now we've talked about that. Let's go ahead and pot up a plant. I'm going to take this Laelia here and repot it. And the nice thing about working with this when you're repotting is it's super easy to get the old material out, and the old material that stays behind usually does not need to be taken out anyway. If it's ready to be taken out, a lot of times you can just shake it out, shake the material out, and all of the old stuff falls out. So you can see the material's still in really good shape. It's really easy to pull out and to redo. Just go through, pull out what you think you want to get. I always try to get the moss around the top just so that we get that. And that's that. I mean, really, we're done. We've got some nice roots to deal with. There's a few old roots in here. I sterilize these. We'll go through. A lot of times the older roots in the middle of the pot are the ones that you have to get. But just feel around for those mushy old roots and trim them off. Okay, and then we've got a plant. It's that easy to get rid of the old material. Clean it up. Grab a nice big bunch of it. Don't forget your tag. Put your tag to the side. Make sure it gets back into the pot. It's one of my pet peeves. Mostly for me. The employees are better at it than I am. So just take a big pile of this stuff. You really don't have to tease it too much. We want it to be fairly dense in the pot. With a root mass like this where there's a little bit of a hole in the middle, I'll put a little bit in the middle like that just to kind of get the roots to the outside. Doesn't matter what you use. Orchid roots are always going to go to the outside of the pot and along the wall of the pot. They almost never go down through the middle. So you might as well put a little bit in there just to kind of get them to the outside. Take a little bit more, put it on there. Take a little bit more, put it on there. It's fun because you do it all outside the pot. You don't have to do anything inside the pot, so it makes it a lot easier. Just kind of squish it down. Should be fairly dense. You get a fairly good grasp of how much you need for any given pot size fairly quickly. And again, if the roots are sticking out of the bottom of the coconut fiber, that's fine with me. Again, that way they're at the bottom of the pot. Then we just take the pot, put them in there. I like to put my fingers along the side and then just push the whole thing down. Push it in there. Kind of move everything around until I like where it's at. I'm done. And you can see already, try doing this with orchid bark. It doesn't work. Put the tag back in there, of course. And I'm done. I'm ready to move on to another plant. A couple of key things, takeaways from this is use big pillows of this stuff and just put it along the side. Don't take some and wrap it around like this. You're basically choking the plant. I like that the material is kind of random and more going up and down than around. I think it helps guide the roots down to the bottom of the pot, and it doesn't constrict growth. And it should almost squeak on the way in. It should be tight enough that it just almost bulges the plastic pot, almost like you would moss, sphagnum moss. As far as that, you want that a nice dense ball of material in there for it to grow, because it's going to soften. It's going to decompose, stuff is going to fall out. So it's best to have quite a bit in there. Plus, like any material except moss, bark, chopped osmunda fern, anything like that, it's always driest when you first pot it. It seems like you have to water every day to keep it moist. And that's just because it's solid, it hasn't decomposed yet, it hasn't gotten spongy. You're going to have to water more, especially at the beginning. And that's going to depend on the pot that you use. Terracotta and something like a water dance is going to dry out much faster than a plastic pot with 6 holes in the bottom of it. So just keep that in mind. And when you are watering, you can feel around in the top, but really look at the bottom of your pot. If it's moist at the bottom, your plant's moist enough. We try to water in the evenings. This time of year, in the spring and summertime, I like to water in the evenings. They stay wet longer. For us, that's kind of important. Plus, we're in a very northern temperate climate. And even in the middle of summer, our heaters do click on, off and on at night. And so having a little bit of moisture on the plants is not a bad thing at all, because they are getting hit with dry, warm air off and on all night. So that's our potting media. You can get it from us. It's not the easiest thing to find. We sell it in large enough quantities at a reasonable price. If you buy it from people who use it for bedding material for pets, it's going to be a little bit more expensive. So come check us out. It's orchidpeople.com. This is Blaine, and I hope you enjoyed the video.